if you're one of our haters who are out there watching.
I want to warn people about hypnoporn.
We need to stay meta.
Like, what?
If Jim would shut up for a second.
Oh, high fidelity.
Okay, don't tell me to shut up.
I'm not whining.
I eat doggies. I eat doggies. Feels like a party.
Stop that.
It's a war. They have made it so that I cannot be celebrating July 4th.
This is 6 Degrees of Stew. You don't need to stay meta, but I'm glad you're here.
Okay.
Today I'm with my co-host from Conspiracy Hodgepodge on Twitch, Stefan Quacks. Joining us is Spencer Sunshine. Spencer is an independent scholar who has written extensively about the U.S. far right, from militias to neo-Nazis. He has been documenting that movement since 2005. Spencer's book, Neo-Nazi Terrorism and Countercultural Fascism, The Origins and Afterlife of James Mason's Siege, was released on Routledge in May 2024. He is also the author of The Organizing Guide, 40 Ways to Fight Fascists, Street Legal Tactics for Community Activists, and co-editor of the Festschrift Exposing the Right and Fighting for Democracy, celebrating Chip Burlett as journalist and scholars. Spencer's articles have been published on a range of platforms, including the Southern Poverty Law Center, Daily Beast, New Republic, Color Lines, and The Forward. He has been translated into numerous languages and quoted in papers around the world, has given talks in the United States, Canada, and Europe, and has appeared on dozens of podcasts, videos, and radio shows. Spencer, we're so glad you're here. I'm glad you got to join us today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very happy to be with such a impressive lineup of fellow watchers of the fringes of the right.
We are an interesting group that came together, friends of us here, that just found each other online, and now this is what we do.
Yeah.
So I don't, when you start this, you don't really know where to go with it. And I had a few things here. I guess just basics before we get into some more stuff that all of us will be interested in. How did you get your start doing all this?
It's funny. When I got my start, it was the standard background, and now it's become more and more somewhat esoteric. When I was very young, I was a young teenager. I was part of the late 80s punk rock scene. I grew up in a small town in Georgia. And the shows in Atlanta, the scene in Atlanta at the time was dominated by Nazi skinheads. We probably had at least a dozen neo-Nazi, more if you include Klan groups. It was one of the active centers of that kind of white supremacist organizing in the U.S. And the shows were overrun by Nazi skinheads. And I ended up forming what would now be called an anti-fascist group, although we were not confrontational like that. And we also were not an ARA group, which was the big network at the time. Basically an anti-fascist group in the Atlanta metro area inside the punk scene in 1990. And so I got involved in more general left-wing anarchist politics after that. And in the mid-aughts in 2005, I wrote my first article. It was about a fascist group, crypto-fascist group that was cross-recruiting from radical ecologists and people who were the remaining part of the anti-globalization movement and left-wing anarchists. They were called national anarchists. And then as the years went on, I wrote more and more about this, about anti-Semitism on the left and right. I got recruited to work with a think tank. And then after Trump was elected, or while Trump was running for office, I even quit my job to do this work full time because there were so many things going on, which we now can see as this rise of the far right that had sort of exploded maybe 2014, 2000. If you look at the Bundy Ranch really in 2014, 2015, it took off. And a lot of strange things have happened to me since then. I was like in the car attack at Charlottesville, and we can talk about this. I was accused of being the QAnon shaman, and
I can't wait for that one.
It's been a strange last 10 years of just doing this as the central commitment of my life. So.
And you're a sociologist, correct? So you went to school for this. I'm a criminologist, so it's curious. We have similar backgrounds coming from a small town because my town is. I'm actually probably know as soon as I say where I'm in central PA. So we have the city of Altoona, Indiana, and then Johnstown, PA. which is like a hotbed. Barry Black, the Imperial wizard of the KKK in Johnstown. He was the constable, and his case went clear up to the Supreme Court for burning that cross in Virginia. So, like, I'm kind of in the hotbed area of what the KKK was back then. I mean, it's kind of,
That's
decreased.
Lehigh, right?
What's that?
That's Lehigh Valley.
Yes. Well,
You're right
near,
out.
yeah.
Yeah. You're right. You're Berks.
No, I'm not Berks. Cambria County.
Oh,
That area is such a hotbed and has been for years of all kinds of different things. Weren't Keystone United? Didn't they get a stronghold there?
Yes.
Not the Skinhead group. Didn't they
Yeah.
get elected to like the county commission? Didn't a member get?
That's who, Barry Black. Yeah, he's the one who made it to constable. And he was there for about, I'd say like 2 or 3. I'm not exactly sure how long, actually. I'm not even going to speculate there, but it wasn't very long. And they finally got him out because of his record. He was violent, of course. And that's how I got him out. But when he was constable, he was even accused of like driving somebody to prison and trying to recruit him into the KKK. His neighbor, his friend, was black, and he didn't even know he was in the KKK until he offered him a job when he was constable. And he's like, wait, people are telling me you're part of the KK. Is this true? KKK, is this true? And he's like, yeah, but does that mean we can't be friends anymore? I mean, it's just incredible. So it's kind of interesting how we ended up here, both of us, the small town to all this stuff.
Yeah, you always hear that, right? Don't you always hear that story about the racist who's got like legitimately has the one black friend or whatever?
Yes. Always.
It's just typical.
I cannot tell you because the area we're from, my husband's black and our children are biracial. And my husband, it's a funny story. I don't care that this is recorded, but we have a local American Legion, whatever, we're members and stuff. And he would have all these like older white dudes or people that felt really uncomfortable come up and be like, well, this one time, or when I was in war, I had a best black friend. Or my husband finally said to me, he goes, do you have a colony somewhere? Like, where are all the other black people around here? He's like, are you hiding them somewhere? Or does everybody just tell that story of the one best black friend? And I said, that's the way it is.
They all have the same best black friend.
That's what I have to tell them. It's the same one. That's why you can't find all the other people of color in our town. It's funny, this small town, Ugh.
You'll find this one guy and he's got like 50 best friends.
Exactly. So Charlottesville was kind of a pivotal moment for you from what I read in the book and different interviews you've done. What was that experience like? And like that kind of led you to this book and what you do, what you're continuing to work on, correct?
Well, I was involved in stuff before that.
Sure.
It was my involvement that sort of when this stuff, the alt-right and such exploded, we sort of followed it like right down the rabbit hole, right into the center of things. And I felt like, at that point, because it became the center of national attention, like the day it happened, you're like, wow, we've moved so far into the center of things. Like we're in the center of what's going on in the whole country right at this moment. It was a really kind of crazy experience. Mostly I learned that you don't want to be in a terrorist attack.
No, I bet, because you were right there, right? I mean, that had to have been just absolutely awful.
Yeah, and I was in Manhattan on 9/11 too, and I wasn't downtown, but it's just like, when I was younger, because I grew up in such a boring area, there was this Chinese saying, it's like it's a curse to have an interesting life.
Yes.
And I was like, that's ridiculous. And at this point, I'm like, yeah, I don't want anything else interesting to happen to me.
Like no more, right? Right? No more.
Charlottesville, I mean, it just it was a terrifying experience from beginning to end, honestly. And I don't know what else to say.
I know. And I saw you dedicated the book to Heather, which I thought was nice too, and to honor her memory because of everything that happened. And no, but I knew that was part of it too. I
sent a copy to her mother. Susan.
Oh, did you?
Very nice. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
We had some exchange. So.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. That she has a copy of that and everything, reading about what this is actually like, considering, her daughter was there protesting and trying to fight against that very thing. So our show, before we get into other things, and I ask you to talk more about Mason and Siege and what your book's about and different things. We, like on Wednesdays, we focus a lot on like conspiracies, debunking them, and things like that. So I came across an YouTube video with you, and it was a Vice documentary, a short piece, where Ellen Wood said that you were the Q shaman. Well, how did that develop?
So there has been a long running conspiracy theory about me that really dating from 2010, and it peaked on January 6th as by when Linwood accused me of being the QAnon shaman, like the day of the Capitol takeover.
Oh my gosh.
It basically was like I was the ideological leader of Antifa, and then I became the international leader of Antifa, and then I became behind this and that, and then a conspiracy theorist in Philadelphia had picked this up. I can't remember his name right now, but he was one of these just total characters. He'd been in jail for like fraud, and then wrote all these frivolous letters, appeals and such. He was actually banned from issuing anymore, and then he accused me of being some infiltrator. I had gone to the mother of all rallies, this sort of militia-esque, right-wing populist rally soon after Charlottesville, and people saw who I was. This guy actually saw who I was, and they basically later drove me out. I was surrounded by Proud Boys. It was like in a gentler time before like the violence with them and Antifa activists so much. And this is caught on video. There's this 9-minute Vice video online. And after that, he kept saying I was like this infiltrator behind everything. And so I guess Lin Wood was on his Facebook. I mean, this guy's a minor character. This other guy's a minor character. Lin Wood, who, if listeners don't know, is this major Trumpist figure who's a lawyer. He forwarded the Kraken lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
He accused me of being the QAnon shaman on his Twitter account, which I didn't see at first. A couple people came to me. All kinds of things get thrown at you online on social media. And they were like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And they're like, "You sent me a screenshot." And I'm like, "Oh, well." I didn't know who Lin Wood was at the time. I'm like, "Yeah, people say this weird stuff about me. I mean, they've been saying this weird stuff for 10 years." And then like my ex-girlfriends started calling me who were like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Whoa, okay,
something's happening here."
I thought to. And then I found out who Lin Wood was. And then there came a barrage of death threats and stuff. But after Charlottesville, I had been really targeted, and that was a bit scarier. So I kind of rolled with it. I like to use it as my calling card at times. And honestly, that guy, Jake and Jelly's like 10 or 15 years younger than me. He's really buff. So I feel there are worse people to be mistaken for.
Right? It's just so funny because you guys don't look anything alike. In my opinion, you don't. But I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just found that, like, just because the world we traverse in over, like extremism crosses over, and conspiracy theories, definitely QAnon. I told you I lost my second mother to QAnon. She's still into it, Pizzagate. So like it kind of crossed, and I saw that and I thought, he did not get part of that conspiracy too. He got roped into it.
A friend of mine, her like grandma, sent her this thing by Lin Wood, and she said she was drinking coffee and she spit it out and said, "No, it's not."
I love it. I can't imagine. So moving on from that is one of my favorite things that I've learned about you, and researching and doing the background was that story. Not the Proud Boy part, but Lin Wood thinking you were Q shaman. That's kind of interesting. Doesn't happen to a lot of people.
No. That one, being in a terrorist attack is bad. That one, there are worse things. It can be kind of funny if you're in the right space. Probably if you're people like us, it can be pretty funny.
Yeah, exactly right. So the book, we have different things we want to cover, but of course, this book I think is a seminal piece of literature and research that I myself, even after reading it I would any other book, now use it for a reference. I don't think it's just about, in my opinion, the way I see it, I loved it because it isn't just a story about Mason and Siege, but it also traces the history of the American neo-Nazi movement and where we are today. So for that, I thought it's a really well done book. But for anybody out there, briefly, what would you say, or how would you talk about or explain to them who he is?
Yeah, let me explain to people who Mason and Siege is.
Yes.
So after Charlottesville, a lot of attention was paid to a book called Siege by James Mason. Mason is a longtime neo-Nazi. He's still alive. He joined the American Nazi Party in 1966 when he was age 14. This was the first really open neo-Nazi party in the United States after World War II. as you may imagine, the far right and fascism had been delegitimized by the war. There were a couple of other crypto-Nazi parties, but his was the first one that was willing to come out and say, it's the Jew behind everything, and wave swastika flags and have brown shirts. And it's the origin of the neo-Nazi movement as we know it today. And so Mason had joined this party in 1966. So he has an impeccable lineage to be a neo-Nazi, to be in the original party. He was very young, so he's still alive. Some of the people are older. They're dying out now. Many of them have passed on. Some of them joined the party later and are still alive. Mason... George Lincoln Rockwell, the founder, died in 1967, and the people who replaced him, the leader who replaced him, Matthias Kahl, was very unpopular with the group. In the 70s, neo-Nazism started to expand in the U.S., recruit a lot of younger people, a lot of teenagers, and so this was still the main party, but it changed its name by then to the NSWPP, the National Socialist White People's Party, which just doesn't have the ring of
I
the
was just going to say, boy, that just rolls off the tongue. It does not. Like that, the name choices for some of this stuff.
Rockwell had been involved in advertising and publicity. And so, he had come up, he changed the party name too. But yeah, NSWPP sounds like some weird Marxist-Leninist party. Yeah. That's the MLP, XLML, it's not as catchy. So a lot of people didn't like the leader. I think up to 10 or 12 groups ended up breaking off of it. The most famous of which was William Pierce's National Alliance. But there were a whole bunch others like the NSPA, and they're the people who did the Skokie demonstration in Skokie, Illinois. They're the people who actually parodied in the Blues Brothers when they go, Jake and Elroy go, I hate Illinois Nazis, and they run the guys off the bridge. Everything, unfortunately, except running them off the bridge, is like completely accurate historically, including the speeches that they give. The speeches
really?
are actually...
I did not realize that. That's fascinating. I've watched that movie so many times.
The speeches are taken from a documentary about another splinter group called the NSWWP, very catchy, in San Francisco. And there's a documentary about them. If anyone's interested in 70s neo-Nazism, I encourage them to watch it. I think it's on YouTube. It's called The California Reich. And in it, there's some speeches, and they take the speeches, the directors of the Blues Brothers take the speeches from that documentary, and they put them in the mouths of the Illinois Nazis and the Blues Brothers.
I never realized that.
The Skokie incident, they're saying, these guys have won their court battle and now they're marching in the park, and that's what happened with Skokie. So anyway, there's this splintering in the 70s, and then what I realized as I did this work, because there's really almost nothing written about 70s neo-Nazism in the United States, is that basically a terrorist wing developed out of it. Like there were people doing grassroots work and forming organizations that were membership-based orgs, or just having these big like open rallies that would break down into fisticuffs. And then some of them started promoting terrorism, including William Pierce. James Mason formed a group called the National Socialist Movement, which he does not almost ever talk about, but it's the same one that exists today. They were the one at Charlottesville. Jeff Scoop, who's now a former who does the circuit, was the third leader of it. And then another one called the National Socialist Liberation Front, who are very interesting because they aped these armed new left groups like the Weather Underground and the Symbionese Liberation Army. And so them and the other groups all tried to, all these splinter groups tried to work together and form these umbrella groups. And then they ended up, as you may guess, fighting with each other and fusing with each other and denouncing each other. And like Mason came out of this, he had been promoting trying to push them all towards armed actions, and he came out of this very embittered by this, and basically developed this idea. He developed it in a newsletter he published himself called Siege between 1980 and 1986. He had sort of fallen out with people more and more until he became a party of one. That's
what I sensed from the reading. Like he just became isolated, and he was a party of one trying to find, like ideologically, he just wanted to put out words more, like, because he never got anything off the ground. It never seemed like he got his feet or was satisfied with any group he was part of.
That's exactly. And so he developed his ideas, and basically they were that any kind of political organizing, traditional political organizing, was pointless. The system wouldn't allow, he used all the 60s terminology, like the system wouldn't allow, I think he was right, an open neo-Nazi group to take power in the United States. He was right about that. Even right-wingers, even someone like Trump, that's not of any use or interest to them. And so he started to espouse his conclusion was that we need to basically collapse the state and society, just create so much chaos that the system collapses, and then after this, neo-Nazis will have an attempt to rally white people and take power. he met Charles. And so the praxis for this was a bunch of dramatic, highly stylized, dramatic, and very public acts of violence, murders, kinds of terrorism and bombings, serial killers. He was friends with Joseph Paul Franklin, this serial killer, a neo-Nazi serial killer who killed up to 22 people. His most famous act was a paralyzing Larry Flint, the publisher of Hustler, this in the old days, famous quote, what they called hardcore porn magazine, which was actually done in my hometown. He was
really?
like a mile from where I grew up. Yeah, I grew up in the area I grew up in was really, it's a bit similar to yours. Our congressional rep was the president of the John Birch Society.
Oh, wow.
He was the guy Larry McDonald was shot down in this is where you almost believe the conspiracy theorist. You can't blame him. He was in a airliner that was a Korean airliner shot down over like Soviet airspace in 1980.
Oh my goodness.
So you can't blame, and he's the president of John Birch. If they are like, oh, they were out to get him, you're like,
exactly.
Weird,
it does seem suspicious, right?
Yeah. Well, that's how I lost a congressional rep, I guess. We had Klan rallies on the courthouse square, all kinds of stuff like that. And so James Mason's philosophy was to try to create just these, through violence, through dramatic acts of violence, destabilize society. And along the way, he befriended Charles Manson, who was in jail, and he became affected by some of Manson's ideas. And one of them was this idea of hiding out in Death Valley, having the murders, the Tate LaBianca murders, which were supposedly going to inspire a race war. They would hide out. Afterwards, when the Black people won the race war, somehow the family would emerge in Mason's incredibly racist reading, and Black people would be unable to rule society, and they would give power to Manson and the family, which is ridiculous.
It is absurd.
Mason created a neo-Nazi version of this where we would try to collapse society or Nazis could hide out. His slogan was total attack or total dropout. And then afterwards they would emerge and take power. And so his newsletter was so unpopular, he made less than 100 copies of any issue. When it closed and he gave his mailing lists to a couple other people, there were 66 names on that, and some of them were just periodical trades.
I was shocked by that number, and that some of them were just other periodicals. They weren't like people. That shocked me reading it. Like, I just expected, because it's so popular now, that it had a little bit bigger of a mailing list.
Yeah, you would think. So what happened, and we can talk about this later, right before it ended, there were these 4 musicians and publishers who were around a fake paper group called the Abraxas Foundation, the most well-known of which are the industrial musician Boyd Rice and the publisher of a press called Feral House, Adam Parfrey, who passed away a few years ago. And Boyd Rice, first, who's long been dogged with accusations of neo-Nazism or being in the neo-Nazi milieu, which he absolutely was.
Mm-hmm.
Had a fetish with Adolf Hitler and Charles Manson, not unknown in the industrial music scene. Industrial music was this sort of super harsh, atonal music that was developed in Britain in the 70s. If people know that, there became a second wave of the genre that's a lot more commercially accessible, that bands like Ministry and stuff that emerged later on. The original stuff is much more like harsh and was mixed in with a scene that became called we called it the extreme culture scene. There were filmmakers and publishers, and it just dwelled in the most negative things, and serial killers and fascism and pedophilia, necrophilia, conspiracy theories, all this stuff. It was really unclear amongst the stuff. There was a lot of Nazi imagery and references. Who was a Nazi, who was using it ironically, who was using it critically. We all knew, because I was a participant in some of this stuff in the early 90s in particular, we all knew some of these people were neo-Nazis or white supremacists, but we never could figure out exactly who. In the end, it ended up being exactly who everyone thought it was. This is the funny thing. But so Boyd Rice, he's this industrial musician. He hears from a neo-Nazi gun dealer that there's a neo-Nazi out there that is personal friends with Charles Manson. As I was saying before, in industrial culture, there was a fetish about Manson and Hitler.
That makes sense. I would expect nothing less.
Right. I mean, you were like, okay. Rice was, I'm sure just astounded to hear there was a neo-Nazi who was actually friends with Manson. Although Rice did end up visiting Manson in prison for a brief period of time. So Rice writes a letter to James Mason, a gushing fan letter, and ends up introducing him to these other people, to Adam Parfrey, later to Michael Moynihan, and there's a fourth guy named Nicholas Schreck who sort of independently gets in contact with James Mason. And so by the way, I know a lot of this stuff from this whole, James Mason sold all of his letters to a archive at the University of Kansas. And I went there to do some research about Siege. And so there are just these folders and folders and folders, hundreds of handwritten letters often from these guys.
Did he make a lot from that cell?
I don't know.
I was just curious because that's a lot of stuff that you went through. I mean, 5 years you said you were working on. I was just curious. That just stuck in my head right now. I wonder how much he made off of that.
He originally was a wheeler dealer of all kinds of stuff. He's a collector. If you ever see pictures of his apartment, it's filled with Nazi knickknacks and books and stuff. And he had bought all this George Lincoln Rockwell and American Nazi Party paraphernalia and sold it to archives. And through this, he had created a connection at this university as this large archive of, quote, extremist materials. And then eventually, I think, wanted to get everything out of his house. There are 60 boxes of correspondence. Wow. I could not read them all, but at some point, you just have to call time on your project.
Absolutely, you can only spend. You would be there forever.
So these guys basically spent many years they became fascinated and friends with James Mason too, figuring out how to publicize him to this underground, to the 80s and 90s underground scene. Basically adjacent to the punk rock scene and this extreme culture scene. They published him in his fanzines. They put him in their books like Apocalypse Culture that Adam Parfrey edited, a very, very famous book. It's still in print today. The Manson File that Nicholas Schreck edited.
That book's so bad.
And then in 1993, Michael Moynihan, who's the youngest of them, edited all of James Mason's newsletters into a book called Siege. The newsletters were called Siege too, and then published it himself. And then they sold it basically through these underground circles to neo-Nazis, but also through these underground circles. Tom Metzger was a huge fan of it. I actually found a video. Metzger was on a national TV show called the McLaughlin Report. And in the middle of this interview, he holds up Siege and waves it around. He's like, this is where it's at today. Which is
wow.
Incredible.
The McLaughlin Report. That was pretty mainstream.
Yeah, it was totally mainstream. So the book, I believe they made 1,000 copies of it. It took a number of years to sell out. In 2003, another guy reissued it. Moynihan himself, I should say, became very famous for a book called Lords of Chaos that came out in 1998.
Is that the movie Rob Zombie made? Is that who made Lords of Chaos?
There is a movie that was put out based on the book called Lords of Chaos. I don't think it was the Rob Zombie.
I can't remember who did that movie. I've seen it.
It was about the Norwegian black metal scene. Burzum is the best known group out of this. This is where the whole Nazi black metal thing comes out of. And so Moynihan wrote this book along with a guy named Dietrich Soderlund, who actually came to a talk of mine in Oslo, which was a very uncomfortable experience.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've had some people in the book come to my talks, usually more minor characters, but this has happened several times. And so this book became very popular. It's still in print today, sold tens of thousands of copies, after which Moynihan and all these guys try to obscure their connections and fairly successfully did to James Mason, except Schreck, who was very open about it. The book went out of print again. It was sort of online. And in 2015, it was rediscovered by a platform, neo-Nazi platform called Iron March. A lot of the real and aspiring neo-Nazi terrorist groups we know today, like the Adamwaffen division, came out of this platform. This is where this new wave of militant accelerationism, it's called sometimes, came out of. They rediscovered Siege. It became their Bible. One of the Adamwaffen members called it the group's Bible. Everyone had to read everyone who joined the group had to read Siege.
I doubt that they all read Siege. It's a terrible book.
It's like 500 something pages.
Yeah.
Apparently they were tested on it though. Over the years though, there have been abridged versions. There's like 100-page version. There's like a pocket version. Someone finally made the 10 Tenets of Siege, so they all had to read this book, and it inspired this whole new wave of neo-Nazi groups. They started seeing these big massacres like at Christchurch, where, it was live streamed and there was a manifesto, and they're like, that's what we want to do.
Lone wolves, right?
Yes, he advocated that you shouldn't form organizations or join them or have public rallies or anything. You should just by yourself, do these actions and try to die in them. He actually suggested. And nowadays you see, at first there weren't references to siege, and things like Christchurch and some of the others didn't seem to be affected by siege, although people who are in these groups were watching them and influenced by them. And now you actually do see people referencing siege in their manifestos and stuff, or are part of, after siege came, some of these groups folded. Siege culture was this name for people who were influenced, following these ideas. And then Terragram is what developed this shifting set of Telegram channels that promoted these ideas. And so I've counted, and I believe there are more now, at least 12, as of last year, at least 12 people at least 12 murders that were committed in which siege or Mason was referenced directly, or Terragram.
My goodness.
So it's had a lot of influence. And now, as you all probably know, and maybe listeners do, this accelerationist neo-Nazi scene is starting to blend, or has blended in, with Satanist groups like the Order of Nine Angles, serial killer fetishists, and the child abuse cult 764. And it's all become this there are strict neo-Nazis who follow this stuff, but it's also become mixed in with this sometimes I call it a syncretic murder cult of things online. I believe the FBI has a new designation for it. It's called nihilistic violent extremism, I think.
Yes, I think that's right, yeah.
And a lot of people reacted to negatively on the left, but it is a real thing, and it is describing a real milieu. I think a lot of people don't quite understand this, where all these ideas fetishizing random murders are mixing together and influencing each other, which is why now we get Black people, such as the guy who committed the massacre in Allen, Texas, and I believe the guy in Nashville, was it Nashville? Espousing neo-Nazi ideas while committing these fairly random massacres. So,
yeah, Henderson?
Yes.
I believe, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Where was that?
I believe that was Nashville. Yeah, I had stumbled across his social media feed, and I reported it to somebody who put that along to the FBI, and when they finally found out who it was, I was like, what? He's Black?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, did not expect that. I mean, I knew about Black neo-Nazis, but
yeah,
like, I did not expect that from his social media feed.
I wrote an essay called Nazis of Color that's available on Unicorn Riot. There's also, I read it as a YouTube video describing this long-standing phenomena of this. Let me back up a bit. After Charlottesville, siege spiked in popularity. And so I was kind of hiding out, actually. There's so much attention paid to me by the fascists then. I started writing this article for this think tank that will be unnamed that I used to work with. And I couldn't get the facts to line up, and I found out there was this archive in Kansas. And so I flew there. Also found out that Lawrence, Kansas is very difficult to get to.
Probably like my town.
and I found, these letters, and I remember they're in reverse chronological order. And I knew who all these industrial people were, and I was trying to figure out Mason's neo-Nazi background. And I remember I was reading the Adam Parfrey letters. And again, this guy's so famous. When he died, there was a long obituary for him in the New York Times. There's been several movies made based on books he published, like Ed Wood and Lords of Chaos. And I'm reading them at the end. He's like, oh, hey, James, I haven't heard from you in a while, blah, blah, blah. It's going down, and they're getting more and more racist. And then as you get to the bottom, he's ranting about Zog.
Because it was the earlier stuff before he tried to hide and tone it down a little.
Exactly, dropping N-bombs, portraying himself as a neo-Nazi, like really, really wild stuff. And it just sort of blew my mind. I remember I walked outside and I called Chip Burley, who was this famous right-wing monitor of many years. And I was like, dude, you don't know where I am. He's like, you're at the Laird Wilcox collection in Kansas City, aren't you? I said I was in Kansas. I was like, yeah. And I found some crazy, crazy stuff.
Wow.
And so I ended up, because I had never dealt with correspondence, or I'm not trained as a historian. I was trained as a sociologist. I have a PhD in sociology. It took me forever to write this book. I did not intend to write a book. It was originally one article, and then it was two, and then I sat down to write it and became a book. Or to spend 5 years on it. I would.
Well, it's a great piece of work, though. I think people will be reading it for many years to come.
I hope so. It was intended that way. I read books that are 30 years old, and it's broken up into about 30 chapters. So it is designed to be used as a reference book. If you would like to know about individual groups, you can just read that chapter, or people or ideas. I have a chapter on each of these four guys in the industrial music scene. So you don't have to read all 450 pages if you want.
No, I thought it was great the way that you broke the book up because it makes it so much easier to go, and like the indexes and the footnote, like it's really well done. Coming from like just a research perspective, criminologist, and all that. Like I love to have a book that's not only easy to read, not the letters and the groups and everything. That's a little bit, had to look at the reference chart back there, which is also handy you put in there because they change their names of their groups so much. But it's nice to have a book that's easy to read, you're learning, but then you can also go back and go, wait a second, what did Boyd say about this, Boyd Rice? And you can go to that, or Adam Parfrey's chapter. You can go and look at Nazi Satanism. So you can go to whatever you're looking for in the book and not have to read the whole thing necessarily.
I have a cheat sheet. If anyone does buy the book and reads it, that there's 100 pages of index of appendices at the end that you can skip. And each of the chapters, and I think I did this too well because people don't notice, a summary of the chapter is written in at the very beginning, kind of like an abstract. And you can actually read the first couple pages, and that will tell you enough to skip to the next chapter. You didn't notice it.
I actually didn't notice it until I went back and read it again last night while I was skimming through to make sure I picked out, different important things that I want to talk about. And I was like, well, son of a gun, it's right there. Like you did.
So if you want to skip the minutia of all these parties that beget parties with an incredible alphabet soup of very similar acronyms and get to the industrial music part or whatever, you can do that. So I should have made that more explicit in the introduction.
I love
helped a lot.
the way the book is laid out. It's perfect for someone like me because like I have a hard time focusing and concentrating and stuff, and like you can like literally like, well, I mean it kind of helps to start at the beginning, but you can just kind of flip around through it without really losing your place. And I like that it was formulated that way because it's like, like I said, it's great for people who have a hard time focusing and concentrating and stuff. And the book is really amazing and incredible, but I just always have a hard time focusing on anything. So it's perfect. It's perfect.
Well, yeah. And for like you, I know you were more into the industrial music sections and reading about those people. Yes. So you could just open it up and go to that, where I was like, that's interesting. Now I know how that ties together. But all these bands, I might as well be reading the alphabet soup letters again because I didn't know anything about that, so they started to blend together for me. I'm like, wait, what band? Who was in that one?
Yeah. Well, I was reading through it and I'm like, oh, I used to listen to that band. God damn it.
Yes,
well, it's like Soul Invictus. Like I used to really, really love Soul Invictus, and I was like, oh, they're bad.
I know the basis of Soul Invictus, Carl Blake, who's become a really a bit over the top anti-fascist. When I gave a talk in London, he came. Well, Stephanie, I wrote the book partly for people like you. I listened to all these bands, I knew some of them were involved in neo-Nazism, except Thomas Thorne, who played in my life with the Thrill Kill Cult and then founded Electric Hellfire Club. I saw Electric Hellfire Club play with Boyd Rice, and so there are multiple audiences for the book, and one is people like you who were involved and listened to these bands in the 80s and 90s to settle these arguments we've had for decades about who is a neo-Nazi. And because I found all this material, these private letters that had not been known before, and was able to put their whole timelines together. So I'm glad that you appreciate it. And, that was partly the point, is for people in the industry who were it was a very obscure, Shelby, there's no reason you should know these bands or anything.
It's so very obscure. Oh, I'm telling you.
Very obscure. Most of them are really horrible too. I like a lot of them, but I will tell you, I like a lot of really bad music.
Michael Moynihan, I'd never listened to his music before. Blood Axis is such a boring neo-folk band. They're so derivative and just bland. And like Boyd Rice is like one or two good songs, and many, many, many albums that only produced one or two good songs. So
yeah, I never liked Boyd Rice. I had never actually heard Blood Axis. I checked him out after listening to the book and was just like, oh God, this is bad. But
well, imagine my surprise. I've never listened to any of this stuff. So I go and listen after the book and I'm like, oh, good gosh, why do people like this stuff? Like, what's happening to my ears here?
I wanted to add in about the quality of the book as a read, in that ever since Trump's election, I've had a really hard time focusing on reading anything. And I was like, oh God, I have to read have to read this book to prepare for this interview. I'm totally dreading it. And I just started and I read it straight through. I had no focus problems. It is, I think, one of only 3 books that I've been able to just read through since the election. So it was very well written, I have to say that.
Kudos on that, Spencer.
Thank you. I actually am more impressed that you were afraid. I like producing fear in people.
Well,
especially when I saw in the beginning all of the the different acronyms, and I'm like, oh my god, I only know half of these. What? Like, what am I gonna?
The circular chart is for you. I made a concentric circles showing people in the industrial and extreme culture scene about their relationship with Satanists, with Anton LaVey, and with James Mason and with Charles Manson.
That was helpful.
I liked the circle, and that brings up something I wanted to ask you about. What do you think of Marilyn Manson as?
Oh yeah, we did want to talk about Marilyn Manson.
How sketchy is Marilyn Manson?
Well, I mean, he's a horrible person and a sexual abuser, clearly.
Yes.
His relationship to this is all these guys became friends with either members of the Church of Satan or, 3 of them became members of the Church of Satan, plus Thomas Thorne became a priest, I think. And then Adam Parfrey became Anton LaVey's publisher. So they were very linked in it. And the Church of Satan actually, and one of my minor audiences for this book are Satanists. And I've been giving talks about the history of Nazi Satanism sponsored by occult and Satanist groups, which I am liking very much. And I have some coming up. We'll talk about that maybe at the end of the show. And so Manson's tie is 2 ways. One, he was made a priest in the Church of Satan by LaVey. LaVey made a bunch of musicians priests on the spot.
I was going to say, LaVey just handed that stuff out. He's like, you are a priest, you're a priest, you're a priest.
Yeah, and that was originally part of the split with this kind of attitude with Michael Aquino in 1975. But he did this with Thomas Thorne. He did this with Marilyn Manson. It was a good strategy to keep the church's name up amongst popular musicians. And then also Marilyn Manson was apparently tight with Boyd Rice very early on. And the beginning of his career was promoted by these guys. They had a little later on, there was a magazine, one of these big glossy rock magazines that like Spin, if anyone's ever seen these things.
I used to subscribe to Spin, yep.
So there was one called Seconds in New York that was run by George Petros, who had co-edited an art magazine with Adam Parfrey, which was the first place James Mason had been published at in neo-Nazi circles. And all these guys started working with Petros and writing for this magazine. And very early on, I think they interviewed Marilyn Manson like 3 times. I can't show, but I do believe that his whole Nazi shtick, the uniforms and the stuff in front of the pillars and stuff were influenced and taken from Boyd Rice. And Boyd Rice came up with the Nazi shtick while he was in contact with James Mason. That's when he starts using Nazi aesthetics.
Well, and in your book, I made sure to know, because we wanted to ask about Marilyn Manson. He, even in his first album, thanked Rice and LaVey.
Yes,
they were thanked in his first album. So there were close ties there. He at least, admired them on some deep level to, acknowledge them on the album.
I saw Manson on the Antichrist Superstar tour like 7 or 8 times. And I could tell you that when the whole stage setup and he had the shock symbol, which I used to have a necklace of, not realizing, it was all, but Manson did what, and this was one of the things that became glaringly obvious to me reading your book, Spencer, was that because of the aesthetics of the goth and industrial subculture, you can just throw swastikas on everything, but as long as you have that goth or an industrial label, somehow you get a pass.
Yeah. And swastikas and Nazi references were just generally more common in the 70s and 80s, across all kinds of bands, even stuff like just talking about, the Ramones make fun of Nazis. Mm-hmm. Nazis are on people's minds. Do you know what I mean? Not even just the use of swastikas as shock value. And it was just so common then. And a lot of these bands like Leibach, were using these references in a critical way to critique authoritarianism. And some of these people were just using it as pure shock, like the Sex Pistols or Susie and the Banshees. And then clearly, I think some people had they weren't neo-Nazis, but they had an unhealthy fascination with this. Throbbing Gristle, for example, used tons of Nazi references and imagery. Not Nazis, but like not Nazis in a way where they were too into it. And then there were people who really were adherents to these ideas or sympathizers or collaborators with. So yeah, it was very easy to hide inside of this because you couldn't tell a difference, especially, and this presages exactly stuff that happened later in 4chan and the alt-right, where all these people denied it and they were like, oh, we're just being provocative. It's just a joke. One person calls this winky wink fascism, where they portray themselves as not fascists. They say they're not fascists, but in reality, they kind of are.
They're winking right in your face like, I'm not one.
Right in your face. Yeah.
Well,
you see this so much now.
I had two bands that I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
Spawn Ranch and Hansel and Gretel. I saw Hansel and Gretel live, and I'm like, that dude just Sieg Heiled. I don't know if this is shtick or if this is something else. And the Spawn Ranch, like naming themselves that, and they were on Cleopatra Records. When I was reading your book, I'm like, oh, I wonder if they were linked to any of that.
Spawn Ranch wasn't linked to this scene, not that I found, although like Rice in particular collaborated with tons of people. I mean, these were popular bands, and at some point they played and collaborated with lots of people. There was also a big fetish about Charles Manson that some of this stuff picked off on, but wasn't specific to them. So all kinds of bands in the 80s, particularly
Guns N' Roses?
Guns N' Roses. So yeah, there was basically, starting in the 80s, this fetish about Manson. I think some of the stuff started in the 70s with Robin Gristle, because they're really into him too. I don't know if that comes from them, but it picks up in the 80s. There becomes a kind of fad for it. There in the early 90s. And I remember this very well because my ex-wife was part of this. She was fascinated with Charles Manson. There were these Charlie Can't Surf t-shirts that were very popular. And the whole thing came to its height with Guns N' Roses on the Spaghetti Incident album. They recorded Charles Manson's song. And this is exactly when Siege comes out. So it comes out with this praise of Charles Manson right at the height of this Manson fad. So just because an industrial band, all kinds of industrial bands and other bands had Manson references, that by itself isn't indicative of anything, I would say. I didn't know the name of Hans. I had a Spawn Ranch record. I sold most of my records recently. Rent is too damn high. I don't know enough about Hansel and Gretel. I do know the name to do this stuff. I read today this term punk rock purist. I listened to very little after 1983. I have to.
Good for you. And also I just wanted to say how much I appreciate it, like the shout out to Oi, writing about Oi. I love Oi, and navigating the world of Oi, like you have to be really careful. My ex-boyfriend and I went to see Cockspar live, and all these sharps were harassing him, and they were like, one of them actually shoved him out of the way at one point. I'm like, why are these people bugging him? And then it wasn't until years later I looked back and I was like, he was wearing khaki pants and like a plaid button-up shirt. He probably looked like Patriot Front or something. But it just, I absolutely adore Oi music, and that's another area where you have to be careful, because Screwdriver was Oi, but so is Cockspar, and Cockspar ain't taking none of Screwdriver shit. So,
You and I need to sit down and listen to music. I should admit this on the air, but I'm a big Oi fan too. But
I have no idea. Is Oi a band? Is it a movement? Look at me sitting here going, I remember seeing the word in the book, and then I went, oh, music band. I focus, you know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't my thing.
Yeah,
I avoided Oi because I equated it with being like Nazi punk rock for decades, and then like found out that it wasn't, and was like, oh god, I missed out on some of the better bands because I just assumed that they were all Nazis.
Yeah, Perkel, Cockspar, I recommend both of them.
So Oi is skinhead punk rock and emerges in the late 70s. The sort of most famous band is Sham 69, Cockney Rejects.
Yep.
Later it developed Nazi Oi bands starting in 1982 when Screwdriver, who previously had not been a Nazi band, came back, reformed as a full Nazi band. It's a very simple punk rock. It's a very lots of drums, chanted vocals that are very catchy. A lot of it about the boys going down to the bar to go drinking, and the famous Sham song is "If the Kids Were United."
United, yeah, they will never be divided. Yep.
I have to admit, I'm not a big Cockspur fan. I still think they're a pub rock band. They were older than Oi, and then became kind of an Oi band. And they are right wing, like center right wing nationalists, but not Nazis. So a lot of skinheads. I got an argument with this about someone. So let me be very specific. A lot of skinheads in the United States are right wing nationalists, but they are not white supremacists.
I was just going to ask you to clarify that, because even with the skinhead movement, like when it came to the United States from the UK, like I don't think people understand the delineations and, all of that. They immediately go Nazi.
I've hung out with a lot of skinheads throughout my life, and it's very complicated. It's such a small scene. So basically there are left-wing and even anti-fascist skinheads. Shout out to red anarchist skinheads. There are sharp skins who are anti-racist.
Sharps.
That does not mean they are left-wing. That does not mean they are not right-wing nationalists. There are different kinds. Skinhead is very interesting because it has adopted different musical genres as its center over the years. It started in the 60s, based around reggae, Britain, and then moves to Oi, and then kind of moves to metal. There were metal skins. There were hardcore skins around like Agnostic Front. Some people in the industrial scene. And so it's really interesting in that kind of, you don't really see subcultures do that. They're almost always based around a certain kind of music. There's a lot of violence in the scene. It's almost all dudes, but it's very catchy and fun music. I've seen like Cockney Rejects. God, there were some fucking sketchy people there. So I don't really.
I bet from what you guys are explaining here.
Yeah. So yes, there's Oi bands there. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No. I was just
no. Go ahead.
I was just going to say to Shelby, like a really good movie to kind of get a background is This Is England. That was a really excellent film, and it showed like the racist skins, the non-racist skins. So it was a really good movie.
I do know the delineation, but I will watch that to learn more about the music. But I wanted to make sure, because I know people when they listen and they hear, like if I said skinhead to my mother, she'd be like, "Oh, geez, do you know what I mean?" Like. She's thinking Doc Martens kicking the shit out of you, curb stomping you. She's not thinking of the other side. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners might be too, like, what did they say?
There's skinheads and boneheads. That's, I mean, that's like the easiest way that I've always known it,
I dislike that division because it implies that somehow Nazis are not part of the skinhead subculture. And
True.
Nazis are truly part of all these different subcultures, and we need to recognize that because that is something inside of them in order to push back against it and not pretend they are not part of our subcultures. You know what I mean?
That's a good
like
point.
White aren't part of our society. They absolutely are, and they are connected to our society. And I mean, I know what you're saying, of course. I mean, I just say Nazi skinhead if it's a euphemism for that, but I don't like putting it against skinheads in general because we need to know they're there. We need to know they are drawn towards something in our subculture that we are drawn to too. And they're creating a different reading of it. I think that's important to recognize.
That's a good explanation of it, especially for anybody listening, trying to, wrap their heads around it.
I mean, this is why I don't like when people are like, oh, white supremacy is a virus. And you're like, I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's not. First off, white supremacists are humans. You're dehumanizing, which they do to us. But I mean, second off, we have to realize that they're pulling off real things in our culture. We have to deal with them as people. They're parts of being part of the white supremacist scene that are the same as belonging to anything else or any religious thing. It provides cultural meaning. It provides social meaning. It provides a social scene. This is often hard for people to transition out because all their friends are part of this. They have nothing to They don't have events to go to. It has given them a sense of purpose just to belong to a movement. And that white supremacy is the white supremacists, explicit white supremacists are there because they are pulling off a larger white supremacy in our culture.
That's a very good point.
So for example, like we don't have the sort of oh gosh, I'm going to kill the name. People who formerly were known as gypsies. It's multiple ethnic groups, the Roma and the Sinti.
Romanite.
Yeah, but there's a name for it. It's anti-zygontism.
Yes, I can't. Yeah.
Right, but we don't have that in our society so much. It's very, very, very fringe, right? Because we don't have that kind of I have to use this anti-gypsy feelings in our society, where it is very important in other societies where you have that, right?
Yeah.
So these things are pulling off larger currents in our society that don't necessarily exist elsewhere. What exists elsewhere doesn't necessarily exist here. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, that does. Yeah, and like I knew of skinheads because my senior year in high school we had I graduated in 95 and 48, but we had a exchange student from Germany, and neo-Nazis were I'm sorry, Nazi skinheads were starting there, and he was talking about, I mean, they had a lot of violence at that point and things that he was talking about dealing with that. And he explained the delineation to me between skinhead, and all that stuff. Otherwise, I would have been completely lost. So I can, I think it's helpful.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Stephanie, go.
I was just going to say one thing that always stuck with me was HBO did a documentary on neo-Nazi skinheads back in the 90s. And I'll always remember this one scene with Bill Riccio where he's talking about like all these kids that had troubled home lives and he brought them in. And he says to the cameraman, he says, "Give us your broken toys." And that has always stuck with me because I think that's what drives people to these movements and to these ideologies is, and Bill Riccio, he wasn't even covering it up. Give us your broken toys.
Well, he's also a pedophile.
Well, okay,
that's a common theme within all this too. A lot of pedophilia.
Yes.
Yeah, James Mason was convicted a couple times of taking pictures of under young teenagers, let's say. I think there is a point of making a distinction between adolescence and pre-adolescence, right?
Yeah.
So, but also in his letters, he expresses interest in much younger girls than that. In one, there's a letter shared where they're fantasizing about like a 5-year-old or something.
Well, wasn't it Boyd Rice too, who also sent him like bestiality porn or something and said, "I think you'll enjoy this." I can't remember who it was.
Moynihan did.
Oh, Moynihan, that's who it was. And I was like, good gosh, these people.
It was a guide to how to have sex with different animals. And in fact, that popped up again and more recently in an interview with an Adamwaffen guy where I think he says that Mason shared him this thing. And I'm like, oh, that's the same thing that Moynihan sent him.
Yeah.
So they were trading, and I didn't get into this in the book. I mention it because I didn't know quite how to deal with it theoretically. When I wrote the book, there was very little material about the far right and women and gender, and a huge amount of it now, especially with the rise of the manosphere and incels and stuff. But these guys would trade pornography, these straight, I guess most of them really did seem to be straight guys, these fascists would trade extreme pornography often between them, expressing pedophilia or bestiality and stuff. Some of it people who were like disabled, like not paraplegic, people who had lost body parts. And I was like, well, what does it mean that these men are trading this pornography between them? And it's clearly some sort of bonding thing, but what's the greater meaning of it? And I couldn't explain that. If someone else would like to work on this. By the way, if you're interested in doing more work about this subject, I'm happy to provide I took everything I have pictures of the source material to you. If you want to explore any of these things further.
Yeah, when we get to, I know I need to get from you, but when we get to the Nazi Satanism here, that's where that was the parts that I was into. Not that the whole stuff wasn't good, but you know how Steph went to industrial music section? I was like, this is my section, So
you have you want to go to Satan?
Yeah.
All right. What are your questions?
Well, I think first, we've been talking about Shrek. He was married to Anton LaVey's daughter,
Xena. Yeah.
And she took care of during the Satanic Panic and all that. And is she a Buddhist now? Is she still alive with her husband or?
Yes, they split up on amicable terms. I just interviewed Nicholas Schreck after the book came out. So Schreck was a Satanist who was in this hokey band called Radio Werewolf. they had ended up, I'll go through the Satan thing. They had done an interview with Tom Metzger in 1987. Metzger had this cable access TV show called Race and Reason, which I didn't realize is named after a famous segregationist book by a guy named Putnam called Race and Reason. And it was a jokey interview, and then the next year he goes back on the show again, and he's quite serious after he's been working with Mason and stuff. He puts Mason in the Manson File book published by Adam Parfrey. And then, let me go back. Marilyn Manson, he writes the introduction to an Anton LaVey book, but I actually just realized it's actually published by Adam Parfrey. So he is
really? That's the Satan Speaks.
It's on Feral House, because it was like, all of LaVey's books are on Feral House after a certain point. So Shrek, yes, eventually in 1988 meets and marries Zena LaVey, Anton's daughter. They have a break with Anton LaVey. He's the founder of the Church of Satan, was always the major Satanist group in the U.S. until recently. And then they moved to Europe. They joined the Temple of Set, a theistic Satanist break off of the Church of Satan, and then formed their own group. They all have similar names. I fear
it's a mess.
I believe it's the Setian Liberation Front, but I could be wrong. They eventually become Tibetan Buddhists, and then they split up. Nicholas told me he's still a Tibetan Buddhist. Yeah.
Oh, really? He is? Because I saw the picture. I looked him up to see what he looked like, and the picture was less than flattering that they had for Wikipedia. It still looked very if you would think somebody was a neo-Nazi, that's the look they were going for, like the picture that they posted of him. I'm not sure how recent it was or what, but I was like, he's a Buddhist?
Yeah, he keeps rocking the look. So basically back in 1987, Boyd Rice, again, the guy who discovered James Mason and introduced him to his pals, meets Anton LaVey. They start hanging out. Rice becomes a member of the Church of Satan and eventually a member of the Council of Nine, which is the ruling group below LaVey. Michael Moynihan meets him too, becomes a member, and then eventually a priest. Thomas Thorne later on also becomes a priest. And then Adam Parfrey meets him and becomes his publisher, and publishes the 3 or 4 of LaVey's books or biography of him. And so they're all around the Church of Satan. Now, the Church of Satan is a theistic Satanist group that they look at Satan as a kind of archetype. They're theistic and atheistic Satanists and folk Satanists, we'll call. So atheistic Satanists look at Satan as a kind of archetype of the original rebel. LaVey was into some ceremonial magic, but said it was more like a way of psychological self-improvement. They do believe they're part of the left-hand path. Beliefs, meaning that it incorporates, it's sort of black magic, not necessarily white magic. Things that we would consider unethical or antisocial are part of their beliefs. LaVey believes violence is acceptable. He says, no, you shouldn't break the law, but clearly his arguments are there's no reason you wouldn't do that. Believes in cursing your enemies and using, he says, don't turn the other cheek and yada, yada, yada. Theistic Satanists, largely the same, but believe in a literal deity. And then folk Satanists is sometimes a name used for people who are not tied to any of this stuff, like kids into heavy metal who go and sacrifice animals and spray paint pentagrams. And occasionally there are murderers who come out of the scene, but they don't have a coherent philosophy and they're generally not tied to these groups. So most of these people were atheistic Satanists. When Shrek and Xena left, they became theistic Satanists. So they're all tied to the Church of Satan. There's long been the Church of Satan. LaVey had shared a lot of these proto-Nazis ideas about eugenics, about survival of the fittest. Part of the Satanic Bible is a plagiarism of a social Darwinist book called Might is Right. That's super racist, super anti-Semitic, and super misogynistic. Saying nature is blood and tooth and claw, and you have to crush everyone. That's violence is what rules everything. And they were all obsessed with this book. It's a really terrible book. Some people are just obsessed with it. And this book influenced the people who founded the Satanic Temple, even though it's a strongly left-leaning project more recently. And all Satanists are not neo-Nazis. I should say one study found about 10% of them were, and 70% of them were actively opposed. which means a fair amount. All right, I mean, there's a good 10% is a good amount, but overwhelmingly, if you met a Satanist, I would definitely not assume they're a Nazi Satanist.
No, I know quite a few of them, and I'm in a Discord with a group out of Pittsburgh, and definitely not neo-Nazis.
Global Order of Satanism?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Order of Satan. Yeah, they got the project Satan Not Hating.
Yes.
So where do we want to go with that? These guys are all around the Church of Satan. Around that, earlier in 1973, arises another project in Britain called the Order of Nine Angles.
There we go.
Being like folk Satanists. The founder of it, David Myatt, is a neo-Nazi, had been involved in neo-Nazi circles, have very strange ideas. They advocate what they call culling, which is basically murdering people, randomly if you need to. And more recently, it was a tiny, tiny movement, but just like Mason Siege, but recently it's blown up. It's become intertwined very deeply with this current wave of neo-Nazi terrorists and this, people promoting terrorism. It became very intertwined with the Adamwaffen division. When somebody gets arrested, a neo-Nazi in the accelerationist scene, it's hard to tell whether they are one or not. Like often they use the imagery of it. So that has become very influential in a new way. And then, so we have some theistic Satanists. There's a lot of different kinds of Satanists running around now. And there's the big one, and the big thing right now also is the Satanic Temple. They are, I would say, very liberal group. They've created a sea change in Satanism, lots of trans and queer people. They're feminists. They do a lot of reproductive rights stuff, although they've been accused of being somewhat of a sham of their claims that they have promoted legally reproductive rights have not proven to be true. They collect a lot of money. Where it goes is not clear. There seem to be a number of interlapping organizations that the leaders control, and the money gets shifted between them.
Like shell companies almost.
It
kind of like it reminds me of Scientology, where they have all those groups, or oh gosh, I just did the thing on Dr. Stephen Hassett. The group he was part of, they're still around.
Moonies.
Yes, the Moonies. Thank you. I couldn't think. I'm getting old.
So
shell companies. That's what they look like.
They've created a ton of splinter groups who are unhappy with this queer, and they've sued some of their critics, including a queer satanic group, who've been fighting lawsuits for years and years and years against them. The thing about, but they are very liberal. But what's happened is that these guys, one of the guys who helped found it, Shane Bugbee, and the leader, Lucian Greaves, both came out of this Church of Satan Abraxas scene.
Mm-hmm.
Bugbee was made a priest by LaVey, and he, although he himself was not a white supremacist, was working with them. He was hired as the publicist for RAHOWA, the Racial Holy War, this band. I think you get a good idea about who they are.
Yeah.
Also, not very good if you listen to them. And then there's a radio show from 2003. Bugbee was obsessed with the book Might Is Right and reissued it many times. There's a show from 2003 that people dug up as the controversy with TST heated up, in which Bugbee and Greaves are doing it, and Tom Metzger, the major white supremacist leader, is on it. Greaves is arguing with him about eugenics, saying you don't need to have a racial eugenic, have IQ based, and it'll get rid of most of the black people that way, and you don't have to have it fully racialized, or dropping N bombs and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, it's quite, when you listen to it, oh boy.
And then Greaves remains interested in Might Is Right up until after the founding of Satanic Temple.
He did the illustrations, didn't he?
In the 2003 edition. That radio show was a release party thing with it. But there's been a lot of weird stuff with Greaves about free speech. He defended Augustus Invictus, who was going to speak at Charlottesville when anti-fascists got him pushed out of a conference in Atlanta in 2016. And he said, you're violating free speech. I won't be at the conference either. Has denounced anti-fascists repeatedly. And so this has, with his other politics, this has been and there have been far right people who've been in the temple.
Yeah.
The lawyer a lot of this stuff started with a lawyer for the temple, who was this totally skeezy lawyer who was doing, quote, free speech work, including defending a bunch of neo-Nazis, which, a free speech lawyer, okay, but it ended up he was hanging out with alt-right people and going to events on his own.
Is that Mark Randazza?
That's Randazza.
Steph, you would know because of Sandy Hook. Like, he was the lawyer for Alex Jones.
And he...
Okay, yeah.
Andrew Anglin's lawyer.
Yeah.
And so as this stuff happened right after Charlottesville, people, as this feminist organization, largely, people are being like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are we affiliated with this guy at all? And Greaves refused to get rid of him. And so this started the splintering, and then people looked back and found that Greaves had this rather dodgy background. And I believe it's continued to influence some of his views today. He also helped out at Parfrey at something. There was an event at the TST headquarters in Salem before it opened, but all these same people we're talking about were there. Parfrey was there. Nazi skinhead leader James Perazzo was there. It was like a release party for this book that Michael Moynihan had edited. Parfrey took pictures with Perazzo, the Nazi skinhead leader, at the event. It's just like there was continually being surrounded by some of this stuff. Greaves said he was there, although he did not know who these people were other than Parfrey, and was not
me.
I interviewed him. That's what he said.
No, I know. I've read the interviews too, like with people and stuff too. My question from that, like, I remember reading that Shane Bugbee said that he did the last interview by fax with Anton LaVey before his death. But there was somebody else in your book too who claimed to have done the last interview with him.
Yeah, I think it was, yes, but that was a regular interview. And then Bugbee did one by fax. I think the last regular one was, it was either Rice or Moynihan, I believe, and I think it was published in seconds. Sorry, that's why the book's there. That's what
exactly. You can look it up.
I wrote stuff down. You can look it up because I don't remember these details now.
It's funny. It stuck with me just because two different people saying they had the last interview, but the one being by fax machine. That's just telling of the time.
That's the difference. That's why they're both true, but that's the difference.
Gotcha.
That's one thing they're not lying about, because these guys are inveterate liars. That's the thing.
Well, it's that winking and nodding, and when you know exactly what's going on or who you're associating with or hanging out and you're espousing the same views, maybe not as harshly as they are, and you try to tamp it down and dress it up and put a little bow on it, but it's the same thing.
Well, most of them, it's hard to tell. Like Parfrey, I don't think ever was a neo-Nazi. I think he's more sympathetic than he ever left.
Yeah.
And he was a far-right guy. His public statements, which were more acceptable in the 90s, but now you're like, what the fuck? He's super anti-feminist. He has this tick about developmentally disabled people. He really hates them.
That was strange to see. He really did.
He's super racist against Mexicans. He said, if this was any other, he lived in LA. If this was any other time, the Mexicans living here would be called an invasion.
Wow. I mean, great replacement theory.
It's clear, great replacement theory. But in the 90s, I mean, he said these things publicly. These aren't private discussions. In his private discussions, he seemed to have said more wild stuff. So it's hard to see what he believed or not. But his letters to Mason were the most racist and anti-Semitic.
Which is interesting because he tried to downplay it so much throughout his life as he gained more popularity, from what I've read, your book. Yes. As he was gaining more popularity, he kind of still wanted to be with all of them, but didn't want people to know about it. So
correct.
That's interesting. Yes.
He early on was accused of being a Nazi publisher. The first book he published was a novel, terrible novel by the former Nazi German minister Joseph Goebbels. Mm-hmm. How you say his name. And that was the first book he published to the predecessor of Feral House Press. And so, people were like, this guy's a neo-Nazi. He's publishing all this white supremacist and neo-Nazi stuff. And so as he started making money, he became, at the end of his life, he just wanted to make money. Although he sort of started publicly cavorting with white supremacists again at the very end. But, he was a clear sympathizer. And some of these people, you don't know at what time they're more interested in National Socialism than others. I believe that Boyd Rice, there's like a certain period of time they're very involved in it. Boyd Rice was pretty close and may privately have been. He called himself a fascist and would publicly, take pictures with, Nazi skinheads and stuff. In one case, wearing the uniform of this Nazi skinhead gang, the American Front. There's a famous photo in Sassy magazine with this picture of him and
when I read that, I used to subscribe to Sassy. That was around the age, and I was thinking, did I ever see that article? I couldn't remember, because gosh knows what I was reading when I was a teenager in Sassy magazine.
Yeah, I can send you a copy of it if you want.
Oh, that would be cool. You just mentioned American Front, unless you have something else on where we were just talking about, because I saw an article that James Perazzo, if I'm saying that right, he recently died, and like how you think, like who took over, where does that group go now? Anything about that you know of or you've seen?
There was just an episode about them on The Empire Never Ended, another show that goes through the history of different fascist groups. Yeah, Perazzo was the one at the TST headquarters who Parfrey took pictures with. Trying to avoid some names here. So the first leader was Bob Hike. I think it's hard. I don't know how it's pronounced.
I looked at that too. I don't either.
Yeah, they were the first
Hike.
the first national Nazi skinhead group in the United States. They came out of San Francisco, of all places, sort of reacting to the left-wing punk scene there.
Mm-hmm.
They worked with Tom Metzger. Their big moment was having a white workers' march on May Day up Haight Street in 1988. They, by the mid-90s, Hike left the group and was taken over by, they were officially a third positionist group on paper, which is a kind of fascism that is anti-capitalist and in America racial separatists. So they will try to make alliances with like black nationalists who are racial separatists and others, sort of often in a philosophy of like the left and right should unite against the system, right?
He's a Duganist before he passed away, correct?
Well, this is Hike. So
Perazzo, I'm sorry, we were on Hike. I'm sorry, I got lost there for a second.
No, they were always third positionists. Perazzo takes over and becomes a more ideological third positionist. He is more of an intellectual. He's a fairly smart guy. Got really into spiritual and occult stuff. These guys were all into James Mason. Yes, he later on became a Duganist. He was promoting like on the American Front website as like Osama bin Laden interview, but this was before 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, he like GTFO'd. He did not want to be arrested.
He's like, I'm out of here.
The group gets taken over by David Lynch, not our David Lynch, their David Lynch. They become more of a traditional bonehead group. He's killed in an unsolved murder in the 90s, I believe. The group is, or maybe the early aughts, the group is taken over by this Florida. James Perazzo comes back, tries to take over the group, fails and founds his own project called New Resistance that is Duganist. And they end up launching a very major group in Brazil, I believe, that are called in whatever it is in Portuguese, New Resistance, who are very influential today. And Perazzo ran around in a lot of interesting circles. He ran along with Joseph Saleb Cutter, who is in the Temple of Blood, the Order of Nine Angles guy. Am I saying his name right? There's two of them, right? This is Cutter. Order of Nine Angles guy, who they were the Temple of Blood was the Order of Nine Angles group basically inside of the Adamwaffen division. That's where a lot of that 09A stuff and the neo-Nazi milieu comes out of Temple of Blood. Early on, Perazzo was working with him in these strange groups. And then, yes, he died recently. He was pals with Parfrey. They hated me. I was secretly in their New Resistance, their secret New Resistance.
Were you really?
Facebook group, and I published this article saying that leftists should kick out anti-Semites, crypto anti-Semites, and white separatists, and they both hated that because it meant them, and both of them went off against me while I was watching. It was very funny. And then another guy tried to take over or reform the group in Oregon. Sorry. Then Fiala took over this group in Florida. Marcus Fiala. Him and his people all got arrested for paramilitary training when they were going to go. They were caught. They were going to go by an informant attack with weapons a anti-racist march. And then their lawyer is
Mark Randazza.
No, Augustus Invictus.
Oh, there we go. Another one. Augustus Invictus. I had two guesses.
Who you see Lucian Greaves pull out of a conference because Invictus has been kicked out of it for being a Nazi. That version collapses. Some guy in Oregon Jake Lasky tried to revive it, and it seems to be dormant now. Although it seems like somebody could pick the name up. I mean, they have the rep as being the OG main Nazi skinhead group in the United States. There were some prior ones, like the one Christian Picciolini was in, Romantic Violence or Cash. Skinheads, but they were a local group. And so American Front are like the OG big Nazi skins.
Yeah, I think it was actually Your Blue Sky where I had seen that. And then a friend of ours, they had mentioned they knew the interview was coming up with you, they were like, you know, you should probably talk to John. I was like, that's a good point. I did see that actually on Spencer's feed, and that's something recently that happened.
So here we are back to Nazi skins. The Hammer skins were formed after them. I think Picciolini told me he was at the founding meeting. And they have become or became the most like hardline, well-structured, violent group. And in fact, it's very strange. They have they are in the core of the active clubs. So, and it's even stranger. I asked somebody about this, and I was like, so are these like, is it like old skinheads in their 50s from the active clubs? And they're like, well, there are people in the Hammerskins. The Hammerskins are using it as a feeder in part to recruit. They're like, no, there are people in the Hammerskins now who are not skinheads. And I'm like, what?
That's it.
Right?
I guess.
And Hammerskins are pretty dead in the United States, but very active around the world, very active in Europe, and even in Bogota. There was a group. Oh no, that was a Blood and Honor group. But in Latin America, there are Hammerskins groups. So they have the group that have come out of the '80s Nazi skinhead thing and are still a going concern today.
Is it true about how you have to get what you have to do to get into that group?
I don't know. What are you supposed to do?
I had always heard that you had to hit someone with a hammer.
Ooh. I think
that's what I had heard, but that was all just, you know, like word of mouth around Pennsylvania when I was growing up and stuff.
Could be myth building. Who knows?
And I remember, like, when I first saw the wall, I was like, oh, I really like that symbol. And then someone was like, yeah, you know, there are a bunch of like racists that use that symbol.
Yeah,
never mind.
They take the symbol from the wall, which is, I can't remember, apparently an anti-fascist film, but yeah.
So where is Mason and Siege's influence today where we are? Because we saw Adamwaffen. I guess we should maybe speak on that a little bit, and the dissolution and where they went and what Mason's doing now.
Yeah, so Adamwaffen were formed in 2015 out of this Iron March platform. They dissolved in 2020. Mason became their occasional spokesperson. They ended up meeting him. They ended up reissuing Siege, meeting him. People would go to his apartment and take pictures with him. One of the pictures is with a guy named Sam Woodward, who later murdered a gay Jewish friend of his named Blaze Bernstein, and Woodward is now doing life in jail. 4 other people were killed by Adamwaffen members and affiliates. Very strange situations. One of them, there were 4 guys living. This is when they first came on the radar. I think early 2017. It was before Charlottesville. 4 of them were living in an apartment together. The leader, Brandon Russell, and these other 3 guys. And then one of them killed the other 2 guys. And then another guy was like, might have been a probate and went and killed his girlfriend's or ex-girlfriend's parents.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Break up because he was a Nazi.
Wow.
And then later people have come out of this milieu and Adamwaffen was the big group, and they created a lot of the propaganda that people recycle and inspired a lot of these other groups like the Feuerkrieg division and such. Siege influenced other groups like the Base, again, still around. And as I said, it spread out to this sort of cultural thing, Siege culture, and then into this very strange mix of child abusers and Satanists and neo-Nazis and school shooter fetishists who then go out and commit school shootings and random massacres and racist massacres.
Which is what Mason always wanted, though, from what he formed with Siege and what he was always looking for, the lone wolves to take that type of action.
Yes and no. I mean, it did. He didn't say go out and abuse children.
Yeah.
754 stuff. And he didn't, I'm sure he would really, some of these guys aren't white. And so, it's a little, do they use this stuff in an ironic way? It's like, how many levels of irony are you on in this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
It's with all these other things. It's not like a pure ideological, like we want to establish a national socialist state and we are doing that.
Yeah.
The thing with Mason, though, is because he fetishizes all these serial killers and stuff, and even random things like the Tylenol poisonings that happened in the 80s around the country where a lot of people died. Someone was tampering with Tylenol bottles and putting cyanide in them. This is one reason
unsolved. Unsolved.
Oh, this is one reason we have these crazy childproof bottles comes out.
Yeah,
of.
that you can barely get open. I know, especially with
Yeah.
my increasingly old arthritic hands.
So, but at the end of the day, he's just fetishizing these serial killers and murderers. Like, is this really political? You know what I mean? And it spreads into these other people who are just fetishizing serial killers and other murderers, right? And just sort of all globs together. And his ideas are part of that. But these people are no longer like, we want to establish a national socialist state. Really, they're like, we want to cause chaos and kill people for its own sake, right?
Gotcha.
I mean, some of them it's for the Satanist, like complicated Satanist theology or whatever they have, but it is no longer a strict like neo-Nazi strategy.
Gotcha. That makes sense. What was I? Oh, we briefly touched on it. I really appreciate it because I forget what the murder was that had happened, who committed it, but you put out the Nazis of Color on Unicorn Riot and then did that video you spoke of at the beginning. But I share that often because I don't think people realize that it even goes back to Nazi Germany, like people of color being in, different units and people that were elevated and where we are today, that people of color can actually, be Nazis.
This was a murder at a mall in Allen, Texas.
That's it, yeah.
Inspired it. Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, if you're around, if you watch these groups, or this happened fairly frequently in this Nazi skinhead scene, you will find people of color, a lot of Latinos, but occasionally Black, who are neo-Nazis. I met a Black neo-Nazi who was working with the National Socialist movement, who was infiltrating, anti-fascist circles. This guy, Gabriel Diaz, who was introduced. I was introduced to him by Daryl Lamont Jenkins, who was very angry when he found out.
I bet.
Angry. I was like, this guy, everything is wrong about this guy, but like, I trust Daryl. If Daryl says he's cool, then I guess he's cool, but everything was wrong. And he was eventually. It was funny. People found out who he was because he had previously made the news for being a cab driver who would wear a swastika armband.
Really?
And then, like, at one point, the news interviewed him, and he's, like, very articulate about National Socialist ideology. It wasn't just, like, a Kanye thing or something. Yeah, and so people eventually, I think, also were freaked out by him and found this, and they were like, holy fuck.
What's this fucking guy doing?
People are around. What I found out, basically, is, like, Nazi Germany fetishized – there's several things. Nazi Germany fetishized Aryans.
Mm-hmm.
Not white people. And so, and I think it was Goebbels who even said National Socialism is not for export. Now, even in the 30s, there were groups forming, there were some groups of Germans forming overseas, of German immigrants, the German American Bund in the US, but in other places too. But also, like the Phalange in Syria formed, who were directly National Socialists and started influencing other groups. After the war, because the NSDAP, the German Nazi Party, no longer existed, they, in a sense, couldn't control the brand. So everyone could pick it up and do what they wanted.
Yeah.
Now, people need to remember that Aryans are not Slavs, and Slavs for Hitler were the Untermensch, and when they were captured, were subjected to war crimes, like not necessarily treated like Jews were by the Nazis, but in some cases were. And so America, this was an American reinterpretation for it to be white power. By Rockwell and intentionally, they had this debate inside the party that Slavs and other white people were now allowed. Hitler was not a white supremacist. Hitler was an Aryan supremacist.
That's an important distinction.
Even saying that neo-Nazism is about white power is a reinterpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these other reinterpretations happen too. Like one guy who was apparently involved in the SS who was Persian, although some of them Nazis considered Iranians Persian, formed a group called Sumka, I think, in Iran, a neo-Nazi group after the war there. Groups sprang up through Latin America. Some of them are white, what we would consider white, people of European descent. Some of them are not. Some of them are a mixed bag. These groups started going through Pacific Islands and into Asia. Of course, like there's Japanese groups who have a fairly good, claim to this, although still, Hitler was not fetishizing Japanese people.
No, that was interesting when I read that in your piece, the Japan. Like, I just didn't realize, like, Latin America and all these different places made sense, but I was like, Japan, huh?
There were soldiers. I think when we talk about Black Nazis in the 40s, there were soldiers who were recruited later on in war that Nazis stopped caring about the racial stuff as they were fighting to survive and started recruiting people. But these were like even you say they're in the SS, they were just combat units like the Wehrmacht, SS Wehrmacht. There was different parts of the SS. So for me, it's not. First off, there are black Nazis. They exist. You can say it's a contradiction, but it doesn't matter. They're just as dangerous as any other. Like they hate Jews, they hate queer people, they hate feminists, they hate anti-fascists, they hate leftists, they hate other people of color often, right? Even if they don't, sometimes they do hate people from their own identity group. And they're a mix of things. Sometimes it's self-hatred, sometimes it's not. Sometimes they're just like, yeah, we can be neo-Nazis too. This isn't about me. It can be a whole mix of sometimes you just get into the extremity of it and then you just keep going down it. And
the Kanye West trajectory.
And Daniel Burrows, I was so glad that you mentioned him in the book. The Dollop did a really good episode about him, but I first heard about him when I saw The Believer. The Believer had just come out on DVD and I bought it right away. I'm like, oh, Ryan Gosling, he's hot. And but I know that, that they, fictionalized aspects of his story for the film, but I think they did a really good job of kind of interpreting how someone like that falls into that. I mean, he was a Jewish neo-Nazi, and I in the Dollop episode, they mentioned that after he died, Rockwell was like, he was a good Jew. It's a shame he was a Jew, but he was a good Jew or something. And it's like, it's just, there's so much contradictions within the movement, like with identity politics and stuff. And I remember when the Allen, Texas shooting happened there, everyone was like, oh, this isn't real, there's no way a black man would have an SS tattoo. And I looked at the picture and I'm like, not only is that tattoo real, that tattoo is recent. I'm like, that's a new tattoo. I know what a new tattoo looks like. I'm like, these things don't make sense, but that's just how it is. I had Quacks. Yeah, I think you had wanted to say something earlier.
Yeah, I have a further sort of set of questions. Because we've mentioned Throbbing Gristle, we've mentioned the Order of Nine Angles, and we've mentioned the Temple of Blood. I was wondering if you had looked into the influence of the Order of Nine Angles on the industrial scene and the occult scene around that, because when I study the stuff from the Order of Nine Angles now, it really makes me think a lot of the stuff that I used to listen to is very shady, because I keep, oh, that's what they were talking about, kind of thing. And Toby, which of course was the Chaos Magic occult group that came out of Throbbing Gristle and Psychic TV, they're the ones that started the idea of with the OV spelling, which you see popping up again in Temple of Blood. I was wondering if you've noticed any threads between those things that stand out to you.
So O9A was tiny until recently. I never saw any influence of them in the 80s or at least early 90s industrial scene. It's more recently where they got mixed in with all of the edgelord stuff. And I do believe largely through Temple of Blood, but Mayat's still around. Like that, they produce a huge amount of material and it's still around. I mean, these are all left-hand path groups. I think Topi was influenced by Crowley a whole lot, I would guess, but Genesis Peorge added their own spin on things.
Yeah, there's a heavy OTO influence in that.
Yeah. So no, I think there were bands that I know that like some of the Scandinavian black metal bands started to get influenced by that stuff. In particular, there are bands influenced by it of different genres by O9A. But I couldn't. But most of those seem to be fairly recent. I certainly, these aren't genres I really followed after after 2000 for sure. I kind of like, a lot of stuff is kind of derivative at that point of these older genres, and I sort of lost the thread on them. So I think most of the influence on music from that stuff is later on. I mean, Topi had some influence, but
Definitely.
Jen wasn't a neo-Nazi.
No.
A fucked up person, yes.
Yes.
Again, an abuser, yes. His ex, I think they were married, ex-wife, Fanny Cozy Tucci, claims that in her autobiography, which didn't stop them from touring in the aughts. I mean, I saw them play. Although I remember they wouldn't look at each other on stage. It was actually I saw them at the Masonic Temple in Brooklyn. It was one of the worst shows I ever saw. I was like, Thriving Gristle. And I was like, oh, wow, that was awful. Beautiful space, but awful show. Yeah. I heard actually my friend that I mentioned, Stephanie, who had been in Sol Invictus, told me that Jen, you're supposed to send in to the Topi headquarters like art with your semen and blood. There was all this, and it was supposed to be held in some locked, chamber. And he said that Jen would just sit around and look at these letters and laugh and make fun of these people. Which sounds in character. I mean, for a lot of this stuff, and you see this in the higher ups in these occult organizations, they understand this stuff isn't true, and it's some mix of seriousness of a joke, the joke being on the other people, and a scam. I mean, the Church of Satan certainly near the end ended up like this with LaVey. I mean, he was just like, this is a scam to make a living,
And
I
the
thought it was
split with
that from
Aquino.
the
Oh, I'm
beginning.
sorry. Go ahead, Quacks.
I was saying, I thought it was a scam from the beginning, but
What, LaVey?
yeah.
I mean, it depends. If you ask Michael Aquino, if you read his history of the Church of Satan, which I did read the whole thing again, this is like 500, 800 pages.
Bless your heart. Oof.
He
I've
says
only read parts of it.
no. In fact, he even says that theistic Satanism was the secret at the heart of the church. Was it for LaVey? I don't know. I mean, LaVey was open. There was an atheist thing, but he was into the popular 60s term, the psychodrama of it, right? That this could be used. You hear this from heathens as a kind of psychological self-improvement kind of, system, right? It's about you and your assertion of the ego. Is that a scam? No, but it quickly can be, I mean, I often see Satanism as a kind of hook that you can then fill to draw people in with whatever you want. Right. And this is what TST is filling that in a best reading of it, Greaves aside. You hook people and you fill it in with reproductive rights and church state separation and, LGBTQ plus space. Or you can hook it and bring people to Nazism. Or you can hook it and bring people to some idea that they're the Ubermensch. This is the Church of Satan stuff where it ended up on. They actually said there's a Satanist master race that's genetic.
Wow.
Later on, and you're like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
You're born a Satanist. You're like, Satanism and explicitly a master race, and you're like, Satanism is some genetic master race. What is this nonsense? So they believed some of this, but it becomes a mix of these things, I think. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, it does.
Yep.
Go ahead, Quacks.
I was saying yes.
Oh, okay. You're quiet sometimes, even though I have my headphones on. You're talking. Sometimes I don't mean to talk over you. I'm part deaf in one ear. Well, going there, I think. There was. It was on the tip of my tongue. This is what happens when you get old.
Just you wait.
And if there's anything you wanted to cover, Spencer, that you really don't get to talk about on interviews, because I'm sure everybody's always like, tell us about Mason and Siege. Are there other things you're working on, things that you've done over your career that are interesting that you maybe don't get to share all the time?
Well, I've done a lot of stuff over my career. I would point to right now, and this is available as a PDF and in text on my website, which is spencersunshine.com. 40 Ways to Fight Fascists, Street Legal Tactics for Community Activists. It is 40 legal things that you can do in order to contain and mediate the damage of white supremacist organizing in your community. It's very practical things. And some people print them off as zines and pass them out. I'm supposed to be doing a third edition of it for a small press, but I'm sort of need to get that in gear. I have some talks coming up I'm going to plug.
Sure, please do.
If you are in the Bay Area, this info is on my website. I have 2 talks. The first one is on Tuesday, May 27th. It's a talk about the history of Nazi Satanism. It's at a bar called the Sycamore in the Mission on the back patio. I went to every bookstore I could find in San Francisco and East Bay to ask if they would let me have a talk, and they all refused. So
You're kidding me.
No, they just do. I mean, this has become more common. I usually have pretty good audience at my talks, and people are into it. The second talk is about the book and the countercultural angle. It will be on May 29th. That's a Thursday at the UU, Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Berkeley. There's a different UU. Don't confuse them. And so that info with the address and everything is on my website. Also, if you won't be around to go to the Sycamore next Monday on the 19th, I am doing an online talk for a British group called the Last Tuesday Society. They host all kinds of occult and pagan and related talks, like serious scholarly talks. This is going to be the history of Nazi Satanism talk. Again, there's I think a sliding scale that starts at like £6. I think it's like $8. And so if you're interested in watching that, you can do that on Monday the 19th, and it'll be up. I think if you register, it'll be up for a couple weeks. It'll still be accessible.
Oh, that sounds neat. I think I'm probably going to do that. Well, I don't think. I know I'll do that. I'll make sure to put the links in the show notes too. I'll pull them for your website. I'll put your website and all that stuff down there so people can see for more information about that.
Okay, cool. And those are the media. Oh, I'll have an article coming out, and I'm not quite sure when, in Quietus, this music magazine, about, again, the industrial music angle to this stuff. I have been trying to promote this, and it's a little hard in these neo-folk and industrial circles. It's a very niche scene, and a lot of people are older. It was a popular thing in the 80s and 90s. So, and there isn't the music press that there used to be. So those are my things coming up immediately. Oh, and the full history of Nazi Satanism will be published. It's under review now in the Journal of Right-Wing Studies, an academic journal out of UC Berkeley. But I think it's going to be the beginning of next year.
Oh, congratulations. I look forward to that.
Yeah. And I had one last question. And I mean, this might be relevant to other people, but I guess maybe it's mostly just relevant for me.
Mm-hmm.
What emotionally and mentally do you go through when you are studying this stuff? Like, I'm sure other people experience the same existential like crises that I do when I have to like confront, these types of beliefs and ideologies. Like, how do you navigate without like your soul just like falling right out of you?
Well, I get asked this a lot. From my own personal experience, a lot of people are kind of traumatized by this stuff. I want to respect their feelings. Their feelings are real. This is a common reaction. My reaction should not be expected to be everyone's, right? I think when I first, it doesn't really bother me. But there's some caveats here. I've done it so long, I feel like after you do it a while, it just becomes a rote. It's just words. And in fact, that's kind of dangerous for me. I used to like really get up in people's faces in person. Well, partly older now, but and I wouldn't. You watch the Vice video, like I lost fear at one point around Charlottesville.
Yeah, you really did. I was like, oh my gosh, he's surrounded, and he's just like, I
totally lost fear, and it was super dangerous. You don't want to do that because these people are super dangerous, like the fascists are. Generally, conspiracy theorists aren't going to go after you. I mean, they'll annoy you online and stuff, but they're not going to physically go after you. There are exceptions.
Unless the name is Wolfgang Halbig.
There are people. The book wasn't a problem because it was old stuff, and in some ways, the older stuff it just becomes history. I think it's when people like history, you can go through horrific stuff and the distance is built in there. And if you need to go to secondary sources, I don't go into these Telegram Discord channels where people are circulating, child abuse pornography or I mean, this is actually a legal problem for people, but like, right now I don't sit in them. And that's probably when it's really current, it's being done in live time, more upsetting. I used to do that a lot. now sometimes, and I used to see this when I was younger, to see older monitors do it. I'm like, oh God, now I'm doing it now, where you read a lot of other people's research because there's so much research coming out. You know what I mean? You can't even read all the research coming out, and you don't really need to dig into anything firsthand to do like live monitoring. So I've kind of retreated to that, but like I became numb to it. That is not everyone's reaction. That should not be everyone's reaction. I want to be very clear. There are books and stuff about this. I come from, my identity includes groups that are targeted. And so this isn't like some people are like, oh, well, white guys or blah, blah, blah. And like, that's not, some people, that's not who I am, but everyone doesn't have the same reaction. So
yeah, that makes sense.
There was more. I used to have bad dreams when I first started doing it, but I first started with a lot of red-brown groups who are less odious in terms of their dialogues and stuff. So, in the militia groups, that stuff they're generally, conspiracy theories don't bother me.
They bother me just because of my history.
Yeah, well, you're in a different place. I find, I don't say I find them ridiculous, but I like fringe things. And so, but I got to the point I find conspiracy theories boring, honestly.
Because you've done it for so long.
It's just like, that's not true. Like, Nazis have like some pizzazz to them. They've got like cool graphics. And you're like, okay, well, this is like a critique of modern society and even capitalism to some extent. Like there's some things in there, like we want a holistic community, there's some things in there you can see the appeal of. For me, for conspiracy theorists, you're like, I'm just like, whatever, dude. This is like Trumpist. Like, I find the whole thing so terribly boring. I find the aesthetic so boring.
Oh, it is.
You're like, oh my God, we're in this fascist, if we're going to be in this fascist dictatorship, we're ruled by these dumb people who have no sense of style. Can we at least have some horrifying marches and people dressed in all black?
Instead of wearing a red hat?
Wearing like a red fucking like baseball cap or whatever. Or
dressed like a guy that's the wall, the brick guy.
Sloppily dressed. You know what I mean? Like, these are the people who are going to stick me in a camp? I'm insulted. So.
I just remembered my last question. It just occurred to me as we were talking about this. This is where it wasn't related to Manson. I got that confused in my head. I was talking with my son because he's a historian. We were home and we were talking about where the United States is heading as a country and our government and what we're under. A lot of people say authoritarianism. A lot of people say fascist. Like, there's a lot of words thrown around. Where do you land on that?
Oh, people don't like it. Biden at one point called Trump semi-fascist, and I kind of like that. I think there's the problem. He's not a Nazi, and he's definitely not. There's real fascism. It's a real political tradition that has existed since the 1890s.
Yeah.
Z.F. Sternhell argues it starts with Action Française in France in the 1890s. And so, no, he's not part of that tradition. There are many parts of it that he doesn't belong to. Fascists are not laissez-faire, do not believe in laissez-faire economics at all.
Yeah.
As part of it. So I think he belongs to the larger tradition of what we may call right-wing populism. He belongs to a particular American variant that is super free market, is isolationist externally and super free market internally. That's my argument about tariffs, because generally the existence of tariffs with a free market are seen by most people as contradictory. But it makes sense in this context. Like George Lincoln Rockwell believed, he at one point founded the World Union of Free Market National Socialists or something, Free Enterprise National Socialists, right? And this is like a style that goes back a little way back. You saw it in America in the 20s with the Huey Long, although his version wasn't as racist. This book, It Can't Happen Here, by Sinclair Lewis, where he describes this guy as like a liar who's easily disproven and a buffoon. It looks just like Trump, but he's writing about like Father Coughlin and Long and Smith and other people in the 30s. So he's more like that. There are flourishes. Musk intentionally puts in more Nazi flourishes, but they're flourishes. Trump is not like we're going to have. Trump tries to appeal to black people. They want and black people in their coalition. People don't know this, but one study showed that 60% of Native Americans voted for Trump in the last election.
60%.
And while that number may be high in the last election, in the midterms, it was over 40%.
Wow.
It's caused a crisis amongst the Native American caucus of the DNC in the last midterms. So people of color don't see him. He's not a Aryan supremacist or a white supremacist in that way, right?
I agree. That is where my son and I kind of landed. Yeah.
Yeah, Bannon had this great quote, and it was something like, "We'll get 30% of the black vote and 60% of the Latino vote." He said this a long time ago, and we'll rule America for decades. That's the plan.
Yeah.
So he's not a Nazi in that way. He doesn't believe in this holistic community. If we get rid of the enemy within, we'll have this holistic community. People talk about make America great again as some sort of messianic idea that is like paleogenetic idea. There's this definition by the scholar Roger Griffin that fascism is paleogenetic ultranationalism. By what he means is a kind of ultranationalism that could be racial or not, but it sees the country in a point of decline that can be, but it will rise again as a phoenix into this millenarian future. And Trump, when asked about when was America great, he says the 1980s.
Yeah.
Which was when he was a young man and doing coke in New York. And
yuppie.
Yeah. So it's not this millennial thing. And these are all, wear the uniforms. Where you can say the Proud Boys are a paramilitary, but there are, if you look in other countries, like Latin America in particular, there are paramilitaries tied to political parties. Like it's an American thing that they're not, or developed countries that they're not. So I think of him as a right-wing populist. But I mean, there are elements. The thing is, fascism is not sui generis. It does not come out of a void. It pulls on previous far right traditions.
Yes.
Right. And these are some of the traditions it pulls on to make its political form. And so when people, and I do this too, like we're all really familiar with what happened with the Nazis and the elements they used in their rise. So it's easy. And there are similarities between Trump and MAGA and that, but we only see them because that's what we're familiar with. I mean, they are there. We're not as familiar with other forms of right-wing authoritarianism where we may see the same kinds of connections or other kinds of connections there. And that's one reason we see it. Although you do see things like, wow, someone is just like a full liar, just spewing these conspiracy theories, and people just give up their critical faculties to accept it. Like that you can see.
It's maddening.
So there are elements of Nazism, I would say in particular fascism and its rise to power that you can see in Trump. But no, I don't. It's very heretical, I guess, at this point to say that. But like, does it matter? Like, let's just look. I don't understand what this argument is about. Like, let's look at what he's doing. He's saying and doing these things and organize against it. I mean, I think people say fascist in a way. They don't quite say this. If someone's really a fascist, then you should engage in armed resistance against them. Yeah. And you're not doing that.
No.
Left is not doing that. Certainly liberals are not doing that. So what is it? You want the sheen of that you're somehow, I don't get it. I don't understand why people are so tied up on it. He is not a fascist in an ideological way. Are there elements of what he does similar to it? Yes, but they're similar to other things too.
Yes. And we still have power to the people right now where we can organize locally and take local action and get involved. It's a lot different than what you would see with that.
I mean, he was in power for 4 years. By the time Hitler was in power for 4 years, it was 1937. He had smashed and imprisoned people, and Jews were under all these controls, and the trajectory to the Holocaust was set. Like, none of these things are happening. He didn't do these in 4 years. Now it's more developed, but even now, like, they're doing things like we're going to sell off public lands. Do you know what I mean? We want like information from different departments to be integrated. You know, like. This is a different thing. We'll have tariffs. No, we won't. Trump doesn't have a program.
No, it's on the whim of the day and whatever a news reporter might say to him, or he picks up the phone and he's like, oh, wait, change my mind. That person said that. There's no set.
If it was popular for Trump to be pro-trans and anti-racist, he would do it.
Mm-hmm.
He does not care.
No.
I mean, is he kind of a racist personally? Yeah, he's a little bit of a garden variety personal racist. Does he really give a fuck about trans people? No, he probably never thought about that issue in his life.
No. Same with abortion.
No. He's just totally transactional and does not have ethics. So fascists are committed generally. They are ideologically committed actors, and they will go down for their cause. Trump's not committed to anything.
No. Trump's committed to Trump.
Trump is committed to Trump.
Well, Quacks or Steph, did you have anything else before we stop here and end the interview?
I just
No,
wanted to say that book changed my life. I'm not kidding. It really made me. No, it really made me. It kind of, because I'm done with the conspiracy theories, but I still have the patternicity. So I look for patterns, and I see so much, like, because I when I used to go to the goth club in Santa Cruz, I started seeing some conspiracism kind of creeping into some of the people there. And I was curious, how much conspiracism is really rampant in the goth culture. And I still don't have an answer for it, but this gives me something else to kind of look at, like the so much of the aesthetics. And I mean, even if you look at like how intertwined goth culture is with BDSM culture, like it all fits. It all fits with so much of what was in with the book. And it really opened my eyes. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very sweet of you. But other people have also come to me from, similar backgrounds and said, maybe not it's changed their lives, but similar things. They're like, oh my God, I was a fool. I was taken for a ride. I had no idea. I had an inkling. I know one woman who was Anna Parfrey. She was Jewish and was Anna Parfrey's cat sitter. And afterwards, she was like, he was using me. And I was like,
Incredible.
I was a nice, quirky Jewish woman. She didn't post these books on fanzines on Feral House. And she was like, he was using me to sort of kosher his press and kosher his politics.
Well, Spencer. Oh, Quacks, did you have anything? I know I saw your mic open there for a second.
Yeah, when I said no, I don't have any.
I didn't hear you. You're so quiet sometimes, and then you're so loud if your internet and stuff goes wonky and you can't connect to a stream. Kidding.
Stephanie's like, it changed my life. Quacks is like, whatever.
I can't live up to that. Spencer, we really appreciate it. Go ahead, Quacks.
I already said how great of a book it was.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, Spencer, we appreciate all your time. Where can people follow you? I know I'll put the link up for your website at spencersunshine.com, but where else can they find you and support your work?
You should sign up to I always forget, you should sign up to my Patreon for as little as $5 a month. You can get exclusive content and help support me. That's actually, strangely, the main part of my income, which is not great. How much we devalue intellectuals in our society.
I know, right?
I'm on all the social medias. I'm on Twitter still, I guess, Facebook, Blue Sky. I'm most active on Blue Sky. That's the best platform around. I guess I'm on Threads, different content on Instagram. Of course, I have a YouTube channel. I'm not that active. I do make videos and put them up on YouTube. Patreon's the best. I have a webpage. A number of people follow it with RSS feeds. Patreon, I'm the most active. You can get a free 7-day subscription if you want to see what's on there. And you can also sign up just for the free content so you get announcements and stuff. I make them public. I mean, you can, just sign up for the public thing. So that's
highly recommend it because I've read a lot of your work over the years, even before this book came out, and followed you. That's why I was shocked I missed the Q shaman thing, but somehow that slipped under my radar.
And I think on my webpage, I list most of my articles, almost all are free online. There's like 150 at this point.
It's an incredible resource. You really are for everything that's happened. You're one of the few people that has tracked this for so long prior to Trump. A lot of people picked it up during when Trump's, administration was coming in the first time and, started getting more interested. But you were there prior to that and watching it all form and get up to where we are now.
Yeah, there were 3 of us. Yeah, and a lot of the people who were around were 80s, 90s people are quite older, mostly retired. Not all. David Nywert's around. Heidi Byrick, who founded Graph, is around. There are some people. But yeah, I became this sort of, often Gen X is the forgotten generation in many ways. On the left, I'm always the oldest or youngest person in a room, unless I'm around a certain layer of anarcho-punks. It's a fairly typical thing in political circles. But
well, thank you very much, Spencer. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great having you, talking with all you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for the next episode.
We're going to have to be smart. We're going to have to be strategic. We're going to have to be aggressive.
I'm an alpha guy.
I'll flip a table every time you aren't getting by.
Let's go. Just push.
It's all psychological warfare.
We know what they are doing.
For Trump,
If shit goes wrong, like, I will literally have to leave the country.
Stop that.
I'll land my initial plane.
Okay, hi-fi. This isn't the hi-fi show.
Good night. Nighty night.